Trust the man who cries at your wife's funeral. He might be the man who cut her brake lines. Ray Castellano stood by his boss at the cemetery, poured him drinks, and told him to let the dead go. He was hailed as a loyal brother, and even married the boss' sister. But behind the black leather gloves he never took off was a 30-year obsession with wiping out the Mafia bloodline. Everything changes when his flawless assassination plot is ruined in a luxury hotel lobby. Picture this opening shot, guys. We zoom in on a 6-year-old kid who has no clue she is about to pull the pin on a grenade that has sat quietly for 6 years. The Beaumont Hotel lobby is doing that thing where it proves how rich it is by being completely dead silent. Thick red carpets, shiny brass, and a crystal chandelier making the marble look like water. Outside, Boston is freezing for early March. Inside, it smells like expensive flowers and old money. We cut to our guy Dominic. He sits at the lobby bar with Marcus Webb. They have 2 glasses of whiskey, but nobody is drinking, because honestly, sometimes the most dangerous moments in life happen when you are completely sober and think you have everything perfectly under control. So they are casually discussing buying a 12-property hotel chain. You know the drill. Having a massive deal in public so nobody assumes it is a secret. Dominic is 37, looking sharp in a black shirt, his coat dumped on a stool, but the camera lingers on his right hand, a custom platinum ring covered in 7 tiny black diamonds. Only 2 ever existed. He wears one. The other was buried 6 years ago in a coffin that only held a single shoe and a purse. That is the kind of grief that turns a man to ice. And right at that second, a little girl pops up next to him, small for her age, wearing a winter coat that is way too big, clutching a stuffed cat missing an ear. Life always drops its heaviest weights when you are busy looking the other way. She stops by his stool and just stares, not at his face, but directly at that ring, like a kid looking at a toy on a high shelf now. Let us hit pause. In this exact moment, 8 armed guards standing within 20 meters all tense up, hands slide into jackets, ready to draw weapons on a child. The little girl does not even blink. She just looks up and says, "Sir, my mom has a ring just like yours." Boom. Marcus completely stops breathing. Dominic Moretti, a guy who once stared down 15 mob bosses in a locked room in New Jersey without breaking a sweat, turns dead white. It is just for a split second, but Marcus catches it. Here is the raw truth: you can build walls thick enough to stop bullets, but a ghost from your past can shatter them with one soft sentence. Dominic stares at this tiny kid. His eyes track to a small dark mole on her left cheek. You can see his jaw clench so hard it might crack. But he stays dead silent. Suddenly, a woman in a gray knit cap comes rushing through the lobby. She is scolding the kid, saying she cannot just run off like that. She grabs the little girl by the shoulder and finally looks up. Her eyes lock onto Dominic. Complete paralysis. Dominic is staring at the exact face he put in the ground 6 years ago. The hotel keeps buzzing around them. Bellhops rolling carts, elevators dinging, people laughing. But in that 2 feet of space between them, the universe stops. It teaches you something heavy: the past never really buries itself, no matter how much dirt you throw on it to try and hide it. Think about the sheer weight of this scene. 1 innocent question from a kid, 6 solid years of lies. And boom, nobody is walking out of this hotel the same. But to understand this tragedy, we have to hit rewind. 6 years before this frozen moment, there was a different kind of silence. The brutal quiet of a highway during an ice storm. March 14th, Providence, Rhode Island. 10:40 at night. Claire Moretti was only 22, married to Dominic for 2 years and 5 months pregnant. She had just found out she was having a baby girl that very afternoon. She is driving north on Interstate 95, keeping that little ultrasound photo tucked on the passenger seat. It is a bitter reminder that pure joy and absolute disaster are always walking together in the dark. She called Dominic the second she got to her car. He was stuck in Manhattan at a late meeting. Her voice shook with joy when she said they were having a girl. He gave her that rare laugh nobody else ever heard, promising to be home by midnight. But fate does not care about our promises. Just 20 minutes outside Boston, the sky broke apart. Huge marble-sized hail started smashing down. She slowed to 50, then 40. Suddenly her brakes went soft. A black SUV rushed up, matched her speed, and slammed her hard to the right. Her car flew across 3 lanes, ripped through the guardrail, and tumbled down into the Blackstone River. It is a terrifying lesson. 1 second, you are planning a beautiful future. The next, you are swallowed by broken glass and freezing cold. The river was only 2 feet deep, which is the only reason she did not drown. That, and the seatbelt she obsessively checked before leaving the hospital. The freezing water rushed in, shocking her awake before her lungs filled up. Then a voice cuts through the dark. "Stay still, honey. I have got you." It was Elena Vasquez, a 34-year-old emergency room nurse driving home. She saw the taillights vanish and scrambled down the bank before anyone else. She sliced the belt, dragged Claire onto the freezing gravel, and tried to help, but Claire just gripped the nurse by the wrist and whispered, "Do not." That is the darkest truth about survival sometimes. When you know the devil is actively hunting you, playing dead is your only move. Picture this. You find a bleeding woman on the side of the road, and her first instinct isn't to beg for a doctor. It is to beg you to hide her. "Do not call an ambulance. They will find me." Elena had been a nurse for 15 years. She knew the difference between head trauma and pure, unfiltered terror. Claire shoves a platinum ring into her hand, 7 black diamonds. "A mobster's apology gift. If I die, give this to Dominic Moretti. If I live, keep your mouth shut." So Elena drags her through freezing hail, driving 2 hours north to a safe house. 3 days later, the TV announces the tragic death of the syndicate boss's wife. Here is the simple truth about life. Sometimes the people meant to protect you are the exact ones you have to play dead to escape. No body, just an empty box for the cameras. A closed casket funeral was already on the books. Claire stood there, hands on her pregnant stomach, watching her own memorial on the news. Not a single tear. Why? Because the betrayal hit her like ice water. Whoever sliced her brake line knew exactly where she would be. Only 4 guys on Earth had that schedule. One was her husband, Dominic. The other 3 were guys who broke bread at their dinner table. She could never go back until she knew whose hands were dirty. Thanks to a shady clerk at the DMV, Claire vanished. She walked out as Grace Bennett. It teaches you something brutal about life. True survival sometimes means taking a match to your own history and walking away from the ashes without looking back. 4 months later, in a cramped bedroom with no hospital records, Grace gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Lily. It is darkly ironic, right? She is hiding from her mob boss husband, yet names their kid after his favorite flower. Now skip ahead 6 years. Dominic is in a penthouse office in Boston. He is 37, sitting behind a massive black walnut desk, staring at the harbor. The room is dead silent. You know that specific kind of expensive quiet, no sirens, just the cold hum of the air conditioning. It is the perfect picture of a guy who won the world but lost his soul. And honestly, that is the hardest lesson a man can swallow. You can build an absolute fortress out of money and power, but it will never be thick enough to keep out your own ghosts. His crew stopped calling him Nico a long time ago, around the first anniversary of the funeral. The younger soldiers in New York started whispering a new title, the Winter King. It stuck like frostbite across the East Coast. And Dominic never shut it down. He did not ask for the crown, he earned it by outliving his own heart. You can always spot a guy whose soul has been scooped out while his lungs keep pulling in air, his face just freezes over. For 6 miserable years. He burned cash trying to find the truth. He hired private investigators. He paid off retired FBI agents to tear apart the accident reports. Because here is the heavy truth about real grief. The pain never actually goes away. You just get remarkably good at building an impenetrable empire to hide it inside. This guy was so obsessed. He bought the whole tow lot holding her ruined car just to drag the wreckage to a secret garage. He paid a forensic genius to crawl over the crushed metal for 4 months. The cops called it a tragic accident, hail on a dark highway. But the engineer took a shot of bourbon and gave Dominic the nightmare truth. The brake line was clean, but way too clean. Someone knew exactly how to make a hit look like bad luck. Dominic handed over a stack of cash and buried the secret. They never found her body. Just a shoe, a bag, and a smear of blood. Let me tell you, the worst kind of torture is not ignorance. The absolute worst torture is knowing in your gut that your family was destroyed, but having absolutely no one in the room to punish for it. That coffin they buried was completely empty. The only guy standing shoulder to shoulder with Dominic at the graveyard was Ray Castellano, the one friend he trusted with his life that night. Ray poured him a drink and hit him with that classic mobster sympathy. "Boss, to save your mind. You have to let the dead stay dead," and Dominic bought it. He leaned on Ray for 6 solid years, completely blind to the snake in his house now. Dominic sits at his desk, flipping through a folder for a hotel buyout. 12 properties meant to wash his dirty money into a clean empire. It is a brutal reminder of how life actually works. We build these massive walls to keep our worst enemies outside, completely forgetting that the deadliest venom is usually poured by the guy mixing our drinks. Picture the opening scene of a mob tragedy. Tuesday at noon, dead center in the flagship lobby of the Beaumont. Notice who is calling the shots here. Ray suggested the meeting. Ray picked the spot. Ray set the time, and Dominic, the big boss, he just nods along. Pause right here and look at his right hand resting on that desk. A platinum wedding band catching the afternoon light. He spins it once, twice, 3 times around his finger. It is a ghost reflex, 6 years of waking up and doing the exact same thing before putting on his coat. And here is the bitter truth about grief: it becomes a muscle memory. In walks Marcus Webb, shoving his reading glasses into his gray hair, holding the Wednesday Wire notes. Dominic does not even look up. Marcus has known this guy since they were 25. He sees the dead eyes. He asks if Nico is doing all right. Dominic just stares out the window at the Boston harbor, all lit up in that brassy late afternoon sun. He says some wounds do not heal. You just carry them until you drop. That is the lesson, guys. Time does not heal anything. It just makes your back stronger. Marcus leaves him alone with that spinning ring. But wait, let us cut 35 miles south to Providence, Rhode Island. Same exact Sunday afternoon. A 6-year-old girl is trying to trace the 3 stars of a hunter's belt with a yellow pencil. She is walking home, holding the hand of a woman the entire world thinks is in the ground. The neighbors call her Grace Bennett. She is 28. Look at how this woman lives. She works at the public library in Providence, just 3 blocks from a 2-room fake apartment, where the winter radiator screams, and her kid names the outside maple tree Martha. It is a sweet, normal life on the surface, but do not let it fool you. The library gig is pure strategy. That little staff login card is a skeleton key to court records, property filings, and FBI bulletins. You want a lesson in survival. Never leave a digital footprint. She never once uses her own laptop every single week. She drives 40 minutes across the state line to Attleboro, or down to Warwick, logging into public library terminals under a fresh, untraceable alias. She is playing a long, quiet game of chess. Now let us talk about her secret weapon, an ordinary leather notebook. If her kid asks, she smiles and calls it a grown-up grocery list. But beneath that sweet motherly lie is a brutal, hand-coded hit list. 47 names, the entire Moretti inner circle, mapped out over 6 years from obituaries, wedding announcements, and court dockets. The irony here is thick. The woman they tried to erase is the one quietly erasing their shadows. She got her best intel from Harold Finch, an old newspaper hound who spent 30 years covering the mob before a heart attack sidelined him. She reached out from a burner email, playing the part of an innocent graduate student writing a thesis on waterfront labor. She is a master of disguise. For 2 whole years old Harold feeds her the dirty files his editors never let him print. That is how she gets her hands on the real accident report. That is how she traces the black SUV that ran her off the interstate in the hail, scrubbed plates, Delaware shell companies. 4 layers of red tape leading straight back to the Bianchi family. Of course it was the Bianchis. They hated her husband long before she ever walked into his life. But here is the piece of the puzzle that keeps her awake. Someone inside Dominic's own house gave the Bianchis her location that night. The betrayal always comes from inside the house. Remember that, so she grinds away. Library in the morning, hunting ghosts then. She shifts back to mom mode. Afternoons, she walks 6 blocks to the elementary school to pick up a daughter so sharp the teachers call her their little lawyer. Evenings are for cheap pasta and getting Lily to bed with a ragged stuffed cat named Captain. Then the notebook comes out. It is a tragedy when you really look at it. Little Lily genuinely believes her father was a saint who died in a car crash. Claire sold her that lie with one blurry photo and a brave smile. Kids never push too hard when they sense the soft, broken parts of their parents. It is a survival instinct. And speaking of broken things, hidden under a winter blanket in the back of Claire's closet is a wooden box. Inside is a platinum Orion ring studded with 7 black diamonds. She bought that diamond ring for Dominic the year they got engaged. A perfect match to her own, but on the morning they tried to kill her. She had left hers on the dresser because her pregnant fingers were too swollen. The ring they buried with the fake body on the riverbank was just a plain decoy for 6 long years. That real Orion ring has been sitting in the dark, waiting for a punchline, and yesterday, the universe delivered. Claire is sitting in the library break room, flipping through the business section of the Boston Globe. There is a photo from a charity gala. Dominic is there, staring through the camera like a dead man walking. But right behind him, 1/2 step back, Ray Castellano, his senior counsel. She stares at that newspaper photo until the ink blurs. Ray has aged. The jawline is thicker, the hairline is retreating. But those eyes are unmistakable. They are the exact same dead eyes she locked onto for half a second through a shattered windshield in the freezing rain. The trauma hits her so hard she throws up in the staff bathroom. Fate is a cruel joke, isn't it? By sunset, she has booked a cheap hotel in Cambridge and 2 morning train tickets. She tells her little girl they are taking a birthday trip to Boston. Lily is turning 6 on March 18th, and she goes to sleep glowing with pure joy. Claire lies awake the entire night, staring at that diamond ring on the nightstand. And this is where the perfect plan breaks. You and I have seen this 100 times in movies. The foolproof plan. Step 1, hit the hotel lobby 10 minutes early. Step 2, sit in the cafe. Confirm the traitor's face from 40 feet away. Step 3, vanish. She does not need to start a war today. She just needs to know for sure. She parks little Lily at a round table with a glass of apple juice, a birthday chocolate croissant, and a paperback book. The ragged toy cat gets propped up against the sugar bowl. Claire gives the classic mom instruction: do not move a muscle for 10 minutes. She tells the kid to count the people wearing red scarves to keep her busy. Lily nods, totally clueless to the danger. Claire turns her back and heads for the elevator to the 3rd floor. Claire is playing this so smooth. She does not even need to breach the room. She just strolls down that heavy carpeted hallway, playing the part of a confused tourist looking for a fake seminar. She drifts past the brass easel outside the main salon, right where the Moretti name is engraved. And there he is, visible through the cracked door. Ray Castellano, sitting at the head of the table, wearing his ridiculous black leather gloves indoors. It is him. The eyes prove it. She spins around before he can even blink and glides right back into the elevator. Easy in, easy out, but down in the cafe. The universe throws a wrench in the gears. Lily makes it to 43 red scarves before a lady with a dog in a bag ruins her count. The toy cat slips off the chair, and Lily dives under the table to grab it. This is the exact moment fate decides to have a laugh at everyone's expense. When the kid pops back up, a man is walking right past her toward the lobby bar, and catching the light on his right hand is a platinum ring with 7 black diamonds. A ring she has seen sitting in her mother's wooden box her entire life. So she follows him. Dominic Moretti takes a seat at the bar, ordering a water with a single olive. He holds the glass just to signal to his security detail that the room is secure. Then he feels a tiny tap on his elbow. He looks down and sees a 6-year-old girl in a little navy coat, holding a beat-up gray stuffed cat with a missing ear. Stop the tape right here and look at this masterpiece of tension. The little girl is not even looking at his face. She is entirely focused on his hand. His 2 massive bodyguards instantly step away from the pillars, ready to sweep the threat. But Dominic just lifts one single finger, a motion so small you would miss it if you blinked and they freeze. He is a monster, sure, but he does not threaten children. The kid finally speaks up, telling him her mom has a ring just like his. The entire busy lobby keeps spinning, completely unaware of the absolute earthquake happening inside this mob boss. His face is stone, but his dead heart violently kicks his ribs. He asks for the mother's name. The kid says Grace, then asks for his olive. He stared at the little girl, noticing the dark mole on her cheek, the familiar way her mouth curved. He pulled the toothpick from his glass and offered her the olive. Go ahead. She took it with tiny fingers. Then a voice echoed from the elevators. Lily, Lily, honey, you cannot. The voice shattered into silence. Dominic did not whip his head around, he just froze. He knew that if he turned around, the frozen empire he had built over 6 years would instantly collapse. But he turned anyway. Standing 6 feet away was a woman in a gray hat, her hand suspended in the air. This is the profound thing about the past. You can bury it in an empty coffin. You can run away and change your name, but sooner or later, it will walk right into a hotel lobby and tap you on the shoulder. Let's hit pause right here, you and me. 6 years of absolute ghost town silence, shattered in 2 seconds flat. Dominic stands up from that bar stool, moving like he's underwater, terrified that breathing too hard will make his dead wife vaporize. But here comes the cruel irony of fate. At that exact second, the elevator opens and out steps Ray Castellano, looking sharp. Ray spots his boss, spots the kid and sees her watch his face. A stone-cold mob enforcer, who hasn't flinched in a dozen years, suddenly looks like a guy standing on a landmine. His face turns the color of a wet napkin, and Claire, from 30 feet away, she reads him like a billboard. The lesson here: the truth always shows up uninvited, and usually at the worst possible time. She grabs Lily's hand and leans into Dominic's chest. She leans in, and this is where it just rips your heart right out. She whispers, "If you love me, do not follow, and do not trust him then." She is gone. A flash through the revolving doors, a cab door slams, and she is a ghost in the traffic again. Look at Dominic. Frozen at the Beaumont bar, hands still gripping his water glass like a statue. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Sometimes getting exactly what you prayed for is way more terrifying than never getting it at all. Marcus comes sprinting up, completely panicked, asking why Dominic looks like he saw a ghost. But Dominic doesn't say a single word. He is just staring at the empty space outside, and then, right on cue, those heavy measured footsteps step up behind him. "Boss," Ray says, casual as ever, slipping right back into his innocent act. Listen to Ray's voice here. It is completely normal. Everything all right. The room is ready. Not a single tremor. Now put yourself in Dominic's shoes. He slowly turns to look at the guy who literally stood shoulder to shoulder with him at Claire's empty grave. He is studying everything now, the jaw. Those black leather gloves Ray never takes off. But there it is, a tiny layer of sweat right at the hairline. Claire's warning is just ringing in his head. Do not trust him. So Dominic does what survivors do. He throws up the mask. He forces his face into that dead-eyed stare, tells Ray to go up, and says he follow. Here is a hard truth for you and me. Betrayal never comes from your enemies, it comes from your shadow. Dominic walks calmly to the restroom, locks the door, and collapses against the marble counter. Look at his hands shaking. These hands have not trembled since the morning the cops handed him Claire's bloody clothes 6 years ago. He is staring at them in the mirror, like they belong to a stranger, just begging his own body to pull it together. His mind is racing through the details. That little girl had his eyes, she had Claire's nose, and the exact same little mole on her cheek that Claire had. He isn't crazy, she is alive, she has his kid. And she just stood inches away from him, but refused to come home. You know what they say. The hardest pill to swallow is the one you prescribe yourself. The horrifying reality drops into his gut like a cinder block. She couldn't come home because whoever ran her off that road in Providence is so deep in his inner circle that staying dead is her only survival strategy. Close enough to eat at his own dinner table. Watch this transition, because it is magic. Dominic runs the cold water, dries his hands. And when he steps into that boardroom 4 minutes later, the grieving husband is gone and the ruthless boss is back. For 90 minutes. He sits at the head of the table. Ray is parked at his right hand, the same spot he's held for 6 years. The hotel owners are droning on about cash flow. It just goes to show you and me. We are usually completely blind to the darkest dramas playing out right in front of us. The owners notice nothing. But Dominic is suddenly seeing everything. The room is freezing, yet Ray's collar is soaking wet. Ray rubs his wrist every 20 minutes like clockwork. A nervous twitch Dominic never noticed, because he simply never had a reason to look. This is where Ray really starts cracking. They hit page 11, and Ray actually fumbles a number, reading 4.2 million wrong. The youngest Beaumont kid has to correct him. Think about that. In 12 years of running an empire. Ray Castellano has never stuttered over a decimal point, but Dominic, he just smiles this warm, fake smile, shakes their hands, and signs the papers like it's a regular Tuesday. Out in the hallway, the mask drops. He grabs Marcus by the arm and whispers a terrifying order. He wants everything on Ray Castellano from day one. Bank accounts, travel, medical records. And he wants it run out of the private house. Not the office. Marcus is just staring at him. If life teaches you anything, it's that when the foundation cracks, you can't trust the walls to hold you up. Marcus has known this guy for 20 years and he is freaking out. He asks what is going on. Dominic just stares down the hall where Ray's elevator closed and says, I saw a ghost, and I think I finally know who put her in the ground. Let's jump to that night at the Beacon Hill townhouse. Dominic is in his study, unlocking that hidden safe behind the painting. He pulls out a wooden box he hasn't touched in 4 years. It's got a little handkerchief with a C, an old photo from the Harvard Bridge, and a letter she wrote the week they got married. He just slides down the bookshelf to the floor and reads it under the lamp. It is a tragic reminder. Folks, grief doesn't really shrink over time. We just build bigger walls around it to keep moving forward. He knows every crease of that paper by heart. And right then, sitting on that floor, Dominic starts to laugh. It is the first time since they lowered that empty coffin into the dirt. It is not a happy laugh. It is that raw, broken laughter of a guy who just realized his whole tragedy was a lie. She is alive now. While he is having this breakdown, we cut back to Claire. She is just a mile across the river, deadbolting a hotel door with trembling hands. Look at her survival skills here. She gave the cabbie a fake address 2 blocks away. She paid straight cash. She dragged poor little Lily through 3 random side streets and a department store just to shake any tails. Sometimes paranoia is the only thing keeping you breathing. She finally slips into this tiny Cambridge boutique hotel she booked under the fake name Grace Bennett, completely off the grid. We are talking about a cheap 3-star spot with a blue door and 15 rooms, no corporate computers, no digital footprint. It is the exact kind of dump the Moretti crime family would never even look twice at. She drags them up to the 3rd floor, locks the deadbolt, throws the chain, and instantly rips the curtains shut. She leaves the main lights off and just flicks on a tiny desk lamp. Little Lily is just standing there in the dark with her stuffed animal, asking if they can finally go home because her toy is hungry. It breaks your heart, doesn't it? The innocence of a child is the heaviest anchor you can carry when you are running for your life. Claire crosses the room, drops down to one knee, and looks right into her daughter's eyes. "I need you to listen to me," she says. The kid just nods. She tells Lily she needs her to be brave, and that they aren't going back to Providence tonight. And then Lily drops a bomb. She asks, "Is it because that man had a ring just like yours?" "Stick with me here," because Claire literally stops breathing. She hadn't said a single word about the lobby or the guy at the bar. She slowly asks, "Honey, what did you say to him?" And Lily, being a smart kid, recounts the whole chat perfectly. The ring, the olive, the guy waving off his bodyguards and giving the fake name Grace. Claire just shuts her eyes in sheer terror. Here is the harsh reality. You can run for years, but one tiny slip will undo it all. She knows Dominic. With the kid's face, that specific mole, and the fake name, he would have solved the entire puzzle before Lily even swallowed that olive. The secret is out. Claire has to explain this nightmare to a kid. She carefully says the man at the bar is someone she used to love very much. But there is a bad person who tried to hurt them, and that bad person stands right next to him. That is why she couldn't say hello. Little Lily actually thinks about this and asks, "Does the nice man know about the bad one?" Claire says not yet, and she has to be the one to tell him. It just proves that kids understand survival a lot better than we give them credit for. Lily just nods like it's totally normal and sits on the bed with her toy. Meanwhile, Claire digs into the hidden lining of her winter coat. She pulls out this cheap, disposable burner phone she bought at a shady gas station a week ago and clicks the battery into place. The final countdown is officially starting. She dials the single contact saved in that phone. Elena answers on ring 2 and Claire just drops the hammer. "He saw her, and the other one saw me. I need you to take Lily home tonight." There is this heavy silence on the line, and then Elena says she is already in the car. "It is a 2-hour drive through the dark from Portsmouth. You and I can both learn a solid lesson here. When your whole world collapses, you really find out who your true friends are." Claire slams the phone face down. She yanks a piece of cheap hotel stationery from the desk and scribbles 4 quick lines in pen. No greeting, no sign-off, it just says, "Meet me at Tad-Eye on Charles Street, 10 tomorrow morning. Come alone if you still love me. Do not tell a soul, especially not Ray." She folds it up, slipping it into a blank envelope. "Look at this opening scene with me. We've got a woman slipping a kid $40 on the sidewalk, treating him like a ghost. Just slide the envelope under a door on Beacon Hill and vanish. No faces, no names. Fast forward 2 hours. And we are across the river with Dominic Moretti. The big boss slips into his townhouse through the back, only to find this plain white envelope sitting right there on his expensive Persian rug. Here is the tragic part. He knows the handwriting instantly. Before he even touches the paper, his heart does this sick little flip. It is the exact same gut punch he felt 6 years ago when his security guy, Marcus, told him to sit down for the worst news of his life. He takes it into his study, completely alone in the dark. So Dominic reads these 4 little lines and then reads them again. The guy just freezes, hands planted on his desk like stone, the world completely stopping around him. Meanwhile, cut back to a dingy Cambridge hotel. Little Lily is out cold with her stuffed animal. Claire sits by the dark window, pressing her hand against the freezing glass, whispering out to a man who is miles away. She tells him she made it this far alone, and begs him to walk her the rest of the way. It is absolutely heartbreaking. But right as we are feeling for them, the camera pans across the river at 10 at night. We meet our snake in the grass. Ray is staring in a mirror in his 30th floor penthouse. The penthouse Dominic gave him 8 years ago, back when Ray supposedly saved his life. You and I have to appreciate the sick irony here. Dominic gave Ray this penthouse, complete with a touching little speech about family that Ray actually had the nerve to quote at funerals. Unbelievable, right? Now Ray is staring into his bathroom mirror, unbuttoning his shirt to look at this nasty white scar trailing down his ribs. It looks like an old surgical mark, but a butcher actually sewed him up in the back of a meat truck back in 1996. Back when he was a 22-year-old kid named Raymond Falcone. Yep, those Falcones. His family ran the Providence streets until Dominic's father wiped them out. 6 gunmen walked into a cozy family restaurant and slaughtered every single Falcone in the building. Every single one. Except the kid hiding in the back. Picture being this kid. He is stuck in a freezing walk-in cooler, complaining about fetching wine. While his father and uncles are being gunned down on the other side of the door, he has to sit there, listening to his entire bloodline being erased. He barely escapes by hiding in a meat crate, bleeding out from a stray shotgun pellet, riding 4 hours under a tarp completely soaked in beef blood. An old butcher friend sews his ribs together and keeps his mouth shut forever. That was the night Raymond Falcone completely ceased to exist. By the next spring, he is reborn in the Bronx as Raymond Castellano. He buys a fake social security number in cold hard cash and takes the dental records of a 4-year-old drowned kid. He literally erased his entire identity for revenge. This guy's dedication to the long game is actually terrifying. 30 long years. He gets his jaw rebuilt twice in Montreal, changes his hairline, and even hires a voice coach in Queens to kill his Providence accent. He grinds through mob work to position himself in an Atlantic City steakhouse 12 years ago. He literally stages a fake hit on Dominic Moretti. The gunman he paid off 3 days earlier intentionally misses, and Ray shoots Dominic in the arm himself just to create chaos. Then Ray jumps on top of the boss, taking a bullet to play the ultimate hero, and Dominic falls for it completely. He brings the guy who wants him dead right into his inner circle out of pure blind gratitude. It is a masterclass in manipulation, and Ray just sits back and waits. Stick with me here, because this is where the cruelty hits a whole new level. Ray is counting the days like a dying man, counting ceiling tiles then. 6 years ago, Dominic makes a fatal mistake. He casually leaves his wife's sonogram sitting on his desk. Claire was 5 months pregnant. Ray sees the blue ink at the top saying it is a girl now. A son would be a direct rival, sure, but a daughter, to a monster like Ray. A daughter just means a future mother who might pop out a Moretti grandson one day. The bloodline would keep going. And Ray simply cannot let that happen. His family got wiped out, so Dominic's family has to go too. It is that cold. He picks up a burner phone, makes a call to a cleaner named Sal, and sets an absolute nightmare into motion. They paid off a mechanic to slash the brake lines, and handed some random driver $12,000 to run Claire's car off Interstate 95 right into the freezing river. For 6 years. Everyone thought that river swallowed her whole. Dominic buried an empty box and cried on the shoulder of the exact man who arranged the murder. Just think about that. Ray literally held the grieving husband now, back in the present. Ray buttons his shirt, pours himself a neat glass of incredibly expensive scotch, and stares out at the Boston skyline, because the ghost just came back. He saw her standing in the lobby of the Beaumont Hotel today, and she was not alone. She was holding the hand of a 6-year-old kid. The bloodline survived the river, and Ray is completely losing it. Here is the craziest part of that hotel encounter. Claire looked Ray dead in the eyes across 30 feet of expensive marble lobby, and she did not even flinch. No shock, no panic. Ray is sweating now, realizing that if she survived for 6 years, she has been planning her move. He downs his scotch, cracks open a hidden wall safe and grabs his burner phone. He calls Sal, his favorite cleaner, and tells him the mother fox survived, and she brought her little kit with her. Sal takes a long drag of a cigarette and tries to brush it off. He thinks they are fine as long as Dominic doesn't have proof, but Ray knows better. Claire knows who he is, and if she gets to Dominic first, they are both dead men walking. Sal goes quiet and just tells him to finish the job. Sal tells him not to leave the roots this time, which is just a beautiful poetic way of saying murder the child too. Ray hangs up and immediately calls a hit squad parked near the hotel. These guys have no ties to Dominic at all. They only answer to Ray. He feeds them the exact descriptions. A woman 5'6", dark hair gray cap with a 6-year-old holding a stuffed cat. He orders them to rip through every street camera in a 1-mile radius and track their cab then. Ray sits down at his personal laptop. As the boss's advisor, he has the master keys to the entire Moretti surveillance grid. He can see every camera the Mafia owns, including the lobby where Claire spotted him. He is using the family's own security to hunt down the boss's wife. It is brilliant, but evil. We're about to uncover a massive twist. Ray uploads a custom computer virus he built just for covering his tracks. It wipes the footage between 11:43 and 11:56. 13 minutes gone. Ray shuts his laptop, pours another drink, and his hand is actually shaking. But here is what he does not know. At 8 in the morning, Dominic's head of security secretly backed up the hotel cameras to a hidden server Ray knows nothing about. Ray thinks he is a ghost, but he is actually on film. Jump to 7 the next morning. Ray is hungover, completely oblivious to his massive mistake. Meanwhile, we see Elena climbing the stairs of that cheap Cambridge hotel, clutching a coffee thermos like it is a weapon. The pieces are moving. Claire throws the hotel door open before Elena even knocks. No words, just pure silent tension. Elena walks right in and hugs little Lily, who is just sitting there in her blue sweater, casually giving her beat-up stuffed cat a sponge bath. Claire drops down to her knees and gently touches her daughter's head. She promises to come back for her in a few days now. No crying, no screaming. Lily is freakishly calm. She just looks at her mom and asks if she is going to see the man with the matching ring. Claire completely breaks down, tears in her eyes. She smiles and finally says it out loud. She tells her daughter she is going to see her dad. It is one of those moments that just rips your heart right out of your chest. The kid just blinks in shock. The little girl just stares, her mouth hanging open. She had no idea her dad was still breathing. Claire pulls her into this desperate hug, burying her face in the kid's hair. She explains that her father is a good guy, but mom has to clean up a very dark, complicated mess before they can be a real family. She asks if Lily trusts her, and the kid just nods. But then, Lily does the sweetest thing in the entire movie. She hands over her precious stuffed cat. She tells her mom that Captain keeps people safe, Come on, try not to cry at that. Claire is so choked up she literally cannot speak for 5 seconds. Elena gently scoops the kid up, and they sneak out the back to a waiting black car. Within 10 minutes, they are slipping right out of the city, safe from the crossfire. By sunrise, the kid is safely speeding north on Interstate 93. But Claire, she is walking right into the Lion's Den at 9:45. She steps into this trendy little cafe on Charles Street, you know the vibe. Marble counters, fancy pastries. Completely clueless people, grabbing their morning coffees. It absolutely does not look like the stage for a mafia showdown. Claire grabs the most strategic table in the back corner, hiding her face behind a heavy scarf and a gray cap. She does not touch her tea. She just sits there with her kid's stuffed cat hidden in her lap, watching the door like a hawk. And let me tell you, the tension is heavy then. At exactly 9:58, the heavy door swings open, and Dominic Moretti walks into the room, totally alone. Let's pause right here, guys. Look at him. No fancy suit today, just a plain black wool coat and a dark gray turtleneck. No sunglasses to hide behind. For one heartbreaking second, he isn't the mob boss. He is just the broke kid who used to walk her across the Harvard Bridge at sunrise. He spots her in the corner and literally freezes in the doorway for 3 full seconds, forcing annoyed couples to step around him. When he sits across from her, he doesn't even take off his coat. They just sit in absolute silence for 20 ticking seconds. Her fingers lock around a teacup. His hand rests flat on the table, that platinum wedding band catching the window light. He finally says her name, Claire, and his voice actually shatters on the second syllable. All she can say is, "I am sorry." He shakes his head, begging her not to say it, but she unloads everything from the very beginning. She spits it out fast, exactly the way she rehearsed it for 6 agonizing years in the dead silence of her lonely kitchen. She knows if she stops, her chest will completely cave in. She tells him about the brake pedal going soft, the massive truck crowding her in the left lane, the freezing water, and the impossible choice she made on that riverbank before the sirens wailed. The real tragedy is she had to erase herself. 4 months hiding in a Portsmouth bedroom, giving birth in secret, taking a new name in Providence. She built a whole new life out of a notebook with 47 names and an old retired reporter named Harold Finch. It is a masterclass in pure, desperate survival. She traces a Delaware shell company through 4 miserable layers of paperwork straight to the Bianchi family. Then she drops the absolute bomb. She says she saw him yesterday, saw the eyes she could never forget. Ray Castellano was driving that heavy truck. Dominic goes perfectly rigid. The only thing that moves is his right hand, the one wearing that heavy Orion ring, curling slowly into a fist, and here is where it hurts, guys. She tells him she could not come home, because she did not know who the rat was. She did not know who in his own house sold her out. If she guessed wrong, she and their daughter were dead. So she spent 6 years digging in the dark. and she still does not have the bullet to put Ray in the ground. Talk about a lonely existence. Dominic stares at her, the muscles in his jaw ticking just once. He tells her that now she has him, and he has enough power to end it. The light hits them perfectly right then. He whispers, 6 years, Claire. She answers that she counted every single one of them. But here is the sick irony of this scene. While they are having this beautifully tragic reunion in the cafe, a completely different clock is ticking in a sedan parked right across the street, and neither of them has a clue. Claire pulls a small leather notebook from her coat, resting her fingers on it like a priest touching a Bible. She explains that Harold traced the license plate of the truck that ran her off the road. She is sitting on a goldmine of secrets, entirely blind to the crosshairs on her own back. She tells him the car was repainted. The vehicle identification number was cold-stamped. But it still links back to a trucking fleet run by Sal Bianchi's cousin over in East Boston. They have the car. But they have absolutely zero paper tying Ray's hands to the steering wheel. Dominic just gives this slow, dark nod. He says he has the missing puzzle piece. He stares at her teacup and drops a chilling fact. The brake line was cut on March 12th. She went into the water on the 14th. That means a mechanic snuck into their personal garage, less than 48 hours, after they found out she was 5 months pregnant with a little girl. Claire lifts her head, and you can practically see the ice freezing in her veins. The betrayal is coming from right inside the house. Only 4 people on Earth knew about the baby. Dominic counts them off him, Claire, the doctor, and Ray. Claire freezes solid. Dominic remembers Ray walking into the office at the exact wrong moment while he was on the phone, shouting the good news. Ray backed out quietly. Dominic thought his right-hand man was just being respectful, but Claire nails the bitter truth right there. Ray was not being discreet. He was being patient. They sit with that horrifying realization while a delivery truck beeps outside. Dominic finally admits that Ray is the bridge. He was the only guy in the crew with a direct line to Bianchi and the ammunition to destroy them. Every single business deal or friendly advice Ray gave for 6 years was actually a calculated march toward the slaughterhouse. Claire says they cannot go after him today. Dominic agrees, leaning in, and this is where you get chills, because his voice drops so quiet. And that is exactly how she knows the monster she married is wide awake. He lays out the master plan. He is going to walk back into that office, take the meetings, laugh at Ray's stupid jokes, and pat him on the shoulder just like always. Ray will not see a single flinch. Meanwhile, his guys are going to tear Ray's life apart from the shadows. Tommy Russo gets eyes on him 24/7. Dominic wants every call, every bank account, every flight manifest with the Castellano name for the last 12 years. He tells Claire her job is to handle the Bianchi angle. It is a beautifully lethal trap being set by 2 broken people. Dominic knows Claire has the one weapon he lacks 6 years of total ghost mode. He needs her to hunt down the money trail between Ray and Sal. He wants calls, wires, anything that ties those 2 snakes together on paper. Then he pulls out a pen and a piece of hotel stationery, writing down an address in the South End, 4 digits and a single code word. He tells her it is a secret safe house he bought 4 years ago, completely off the books, top floor, steel doors, cameras everywhere. He orders her to go there immediately and promises to find her tonight. Claire folds the note and tucks it away. You really want to believe they have the upper hand here, do you not? But the universe just loves to punish people who think they have finally outsmarted the devil. Dominic asks about their daughter. Claire says Elena is keeping her safe, and they agree not to move the kid from New Hampshire until Ray is completely neutralized. Then Dominic just stops and stares at her. You can see him memorizing the face he thought he buried. He confesses that part of him wants to march into the 34th floor this afternoon and put a bullet straight through Ray's eye, but he promises to do it the smart way. Paper trails, witnesses. He wants to crush Ray so completely that the man has nowhere left to crawl. Claire reaches out, covering his hand with hers. She says she does not want a bloodbath if they can avoid it. She wants Ray kept alive, just long enough to realize he lost everything. It is a terrifyingly intimate moment of shared vengeance. Let's look at this piece by piece, shall we? Dominic looks down at her hand on his and lets out a low laugh. It is the very first laugh in 6 years that does not taste like ashes in his mouth. But remember that ticking clock we talked about. Across the street, a guy in a navy baseball cap is sitting in a gray sedan, adjusting the zoom on his phone. He snaps a crystal-clear photo straight through the cafe window. This guy followed Dominic from the Beacon Hill townhouse at 9:22 this morning. He saw his boss do something incredibly rare. Walk into a coffee shop alone to meet a mysterious woman in a gray knit cap. He taps his screen and sends the encrypted image to a contact saved only as the letter R. Up in a lavish Back Bay penthouse, Ray Castellano opens that photograph on a highly secure tablet. He zooms in on the gray hat. The familiar curve of the mouth, those haunting eyes. His face immediately turns the color of dead. Rotting paper, the ghost is back. He picks up the phone and barks the order to stay on them. He wants his guys to snatch Claire the second she leaves that cafe alone. He specifically demands they drag her to the West Side waterfront warehouse alive, because he needs to rip the location of the child out of her. By 11 in the morning, the kill order is already rolling. Claire steps out of the cafe onto Charles Street, perfectly staggered 5 minutes ahead of her husband. One door, 2 separate exits. They really think they are being so careful. Claire yanks her knit cap low, tucks her bag tight, and heads north toward the bus stop. Her plan is textbook evasion. Ride 1 stop, loop through Boston Common, grab a random cab on Tremont, and vanish into the South End safe house. It is honestly a brilliant strategy. Too bad it only lasts exactly 90 seconds. You see, Tommy Russo has been lounging in a dry cleaner doorway across the street all morning, pretending to read the Daily News. Tommy is 28, wiry as hell, and the absolute fastest trigger in Dominic's entire inner circle. The second Claire walks out and turns north, Tommy tosses the paper in the trash and slides right into her shadow at 50 meters. So now we have a ghost being hunted by a hitman, while being secretly guarded by another. Stick with me here, because this is where all hell breaks loose. A panel van rips forward from a fire hydrant and slams the brakes 20 feet in front of her. 2 massive guys in work jackets burst out the side door. Tommy Russo reaches into his coat before his brain even registers the threat. Screaming at Claire to run, she turns, sees the ambush, and absolutely bolts into the morning crowd near the Boston Common Swan boats. A gunshot shatters the brick right behind her head. Tommy drops low and fires twice, dropping the first kidnapper onto the hard concrete. His weapon clattering away, the second goon pivots and fires back. A hot, bright round smashes into Tommy's left shoulder, spinning him halfway around like a top, but the crazy kid actually stays on his feet. Inside the cafe, Dominic is moving before his chair even hits the floor. He charges out the front door, his hand buried in his coat. Safety already flicked off. The screaming inside the shop fades into dead white noise. The second gunman is sprinting like a rabid dog after Claire, violently shoving past terrified mothers with strollers. Claire is flying toward the granite steps of Brewer Fountain. But tragedy loves a clumsy foot. She misses the second step, her ankle violently twists, and she crashes hard onto the wet pavement. Her belongings scatter against the fountain base, before she can even push herself up off the brutal stone. The gunman's heavy hand clamps down like a vice on her wrist. The husband she just got back is seconds away, but it is already too late. Let's pause right here, guys. Look at this scene. Dominic steps around that hedge and doesn't even hesitate, just 1 shot. And the guy crushing Claire is gone. She is gasping for air, absolutely terrified, and Dominic just picks her up. He's checking her over, totally ignoring the sirens screaming down Tremont Street. Tommy comes up from the Charles Street side, catches a bullet in the shoulder, and walks up with blood pouring through his fingers just to ask for orders. Dominic tells him to handle the scene and call Marcus. Right on cue. Down where Boylston curves, a massive black armored SUV slides up to the curb. It's perfectly orchestrated chaos, and you have to admit, it's a beautiful thing to watch. You have to appreciate the absolute ice in Marcus Webb's veins. He has been sitting there since 10:50 in the morning, nursing black coffee with a spare gun under his leg, just waiting. Dominic throws his coat over Claire, gets her inside, and they pull into traffic right as the first cruiser turns onto Beacon Street now. Here is where it gets incredibly dark. Claire is shaking out of her mind in the back seat, terrified because they know she's alive. But Dominic, his voice is dead calm. He says Ray panicked, and that's exactly what they wanted. He used her reappearance to flush out the traitor. But then Marcus turns around from the driver's seat, and his cold mobster vibe just shatters when he sees who is sitting in the back. Guys, grab a tissue for this one. For 6 whole years, Marcus was the guy who handled her estate. He was the one sitting on the kitchen floor with Dominic after the funeral, pouring drinks until they couldn't feel anything. Now he's staring at a ghost. He just looks at her, mouth hanging open, and chokes out that they buried her. Claire tries to apologize, but Marcus just takes off his glasses and cries. No anger, no demands. He just tells her that Dominic hasn't been the same since that night. and he's just glad she's back. 20 minutes later. The SUV climbs into the south end and pulls into a hidden garage under a pre-war brownstone on Warren Avenue. The loyalty in this scene is absolutely breaking my heart. This is where the reality of their world really sets in. 2 keypads, steel doors, and a service elevator needing 2 separate codes. Upstairs, the apartment looks like nobody has ever lived there. It's got cameras in every corner, a medical kit, and a stash of handguns hidden under the master bedroom floorboards. Marcus stays downstairs, working the phones to get a trusted nurse to the service entrance for Tommy's bleeding shoulder. Dominic finally gets Claire inside and locks the door, and then we get this devastatingly quiet moment. He sits down next to her on this cheap gray sofa, and for the first time in 6 years he actually takes her hand. He tells her she's safe, but we both know safety is just an illusion here. Look at the contrast here. Dominic tells her she's never leaving his sight again, and Claire just collapses against his shoulder. She doesn't sob out loud, she just lets 6 years of pure terror soak quietly into his coat. It's a beautiful reunion, right? But then we smash cut to the villain. At 11:43, Ray Castellano gets his phone call. Only it's the backup driver parked north of Charles Street. The hitmen are dead on the common. Cops are everywhere. Dominic Moretti and Tommy Russo walked out of that cafe with guns drawn. Ray realizes in real time that his perfect assassination plot just blew up in his face, and his entire underworld empire is about to come crashing down. The driver tells Ray they lost the SUV's plate in traffic, and Ray just stands there staring out the window of his penthouse. 5 seconds of pure, terrifying silence. Then he just says time's up. He isn't stupid, guys. He does the math instantly. Dominic was at the park at 11 on a Tuesday morning. He ran out with his gun drawn and killed the second hitman himself. That means Dominic met with Claire. It means at some point between 7 last night and 11 this morning. The boss of the family realized his own consigliere was the enemy. Ray knows he's a dead man walking. He played the ultimate game of chess, and he just realized his opponent tipped the whole board over. It's a masterpiece of tension. So what does a cornered rat do? He runs. Ray goes straight to the safe behind his Lake Como water cooler and pulls out his escape plan. He skips the American and Italian passports and grabs the Canadian one, a Halifax real estate agent, who died of pneumonia in 2019. He grabs a stack of $100 bills 4 inches thick and a tiny hard drive with 12 years of stolen Moretti family secrets. Every weakness. Every dime. He leaves everything with a tracking chip behind. Dials Sal Bianchi on a burner phone he'll destroy in an hour. This is the bitterest pill to swallow. Ray built Dominic's empire, and now he's handing the exact blueprints to their worst enemy. Let's pause and listen to this phone call, because it's ice cold. Ray tells Sal he's burned and needs to cross tonight, offering up the Harbor Network and Boston Police List as payment. Sal literally lights a match, you can hear it, and tells Ray he's a liability. Every wise guy from here to Philadelphia will try to kill him for credit. Sal wants a real reason to risk his neck. And this is where Ray sells his soul. He takes a breath and says he knows where Dominic's daughter is. He doesn't know the address yet, but his tail called in at 8 that morning with a clue. And Ray is willing to serve up an innocent child just to save his own skin. It makes you sick to your stomach. Ray is putting the puzzle pieces together in his twisted head. His guy saw a woman hand off a little kid to Elena Vasquez at a hotel in Cambridge just after dawn. Ray already has Elena's file, and he knows he'll find that child by midnight. Sal hears this and makes the devil's bargain bring him the child, and Ray gets a permanent seat at the Bianchi table. Ray snaps the phone in half, drops it in bleach, and walks away without looking back. And just like that, the rules are gone. We jump to 11 that night. And Dominic is standing at the head of a massive table on the 20th floor of Moretti Holdings, flanked by his bleeding enforcer and his loyal lawyer. The board is set and it's going to get bloody. Tommy is standing there pale as a ghost with his arm in a clean white sling, but he is ready to fight. Dominic lays it out plain. Ray cleared out the safe and ran straight to Bianchi, which means a full-scale war is going to hit them inside a week. Tommy wants to chase him down, but Dominic says no. You have to love Marcus in this moment, always the voice of reason. He pulls his glasses off and tells Dominic the harsh truth if they go to war. Clara and Lily are the absolute first names on the target list. Ray knows where he's soft, but Dominic is already 10 steps ahead. He turns to the glass wall and explains that Elena is already driving the little girl safely up north. This is the exact moment where the tragedy hits you like a truck. Dominic didn't send his daughter back to Portsmouth. He sent her to a cabin in Vermont under a dead uncle's name. Not even Marcus or Tommy know the address. He kept it from Claire too. Because if Ray captures her, he can't torture an address out of her that she doesn't know. He walks back to the conference room, where Claire hasn't even touched her coffee, and tells her the plan. She just begs to see her baby before they hide her, and Dominic has to look the woman he loves in the eye and say no. Putting them in one room is exactly what Ray wants. She just closes her eyes and nods. They survive, but they lose each other. Grab your tissues again, because this scene is a complete emotional wrecking ball. Marcus brings in a secured phone, and Claire dials the number. Suddenly the screen fills with this little girl's face, cheeks flushed from the cold, holding a plaid blanket with one arm since her toy captain is gone. She immediately asks if her mom found him. Claire turns the phone, and for the absolute first time, Dominic Moretti is looking at his own daughter. This hardened mob boss can barely breathe. He manages to stutter out his name, and the little girl just looks at him, totally matter-of-fact, and says she already knows him. She says her mom keeps his picture in a wooden box in her closet. She asks him if he's okay, and this terrifying underworld kingpin just breaks down. He lets out this choked laugh, his eyes welling up, and tells her he's okay just because he's finally looking at her. It's such a pure, beautiful moment, but in this universe, you don't stay happy long. 2 days later, Boston completely stops pretending. At 3:17 on a Thursday morning, a propane canister and 90 seconds of det cord rip down the front wall of a Moretti cold storage warehouse, killing 3 crewmen. By 9 that same morning, a single shooter walks into a Bianchi restaurant on Hanover Street and empties a magazine into 5 men before leaving. The war has officially begun. Let's hit pause right here, guys, because this is where the system completely breaks down. The Boston police. They push out 2 miserable sentences and pretend there isn't a bloodbath brewing. Why? Because 3 captains are taking Moretti money, and 2 are eating out of Bianchi's hand. Nobody wants to be the guy caught in the middle of a mob war. But pay attention to Sarah Chen over at the FBI. While the cops hide, she is quietly opening a case file at 5:05. Meanwhile, Dominic is turning his 34th floor office into an absolute fortress, lobby sealed tight. 2 shooters guarding the garage. The entire cargo fleet anchored. The lesson here is simple. When the people paid to protect you look the other way, you are entirely on your own. Tommy Russo is marching around with his arm in a sling, barking orders like a wounded general. And Claire, she never stops moving. She actually looks Dominic in the eye and asks to bring Harold Finch into the vault. Dominic gives her this look right. The kind of look that says they are finally playing the same game. He tells her to bring him in now. Picture Harold, 70 years old. Wool scarf tight around his neck, clutching a leather portfolio like it is a shield. This man spent 30 years writing about the Moretti family from the outside, pressing his nose against the glass. And now he is standing inside the lion's den. Dominic shakes his hand, and he actually means it. Sometimes the person you spent your life fighting becomes the only one who can save you. Stick with me here, because this reveal is an absolute gut punch. They are sitting around the kitchen table, and Harold drops a bomb that shatters 12 years of history. He slides an old photograph from 1995 across the wood, the Falcone family. He calmly explains that Dominic's father wiped them out over a heroin pipeline back in '96. But they never found the youngest son, Raymond. Now look closely at the bone structure in the photo. Compare it to the man who has stood by Dominic's right shoulder for over a decade, even with the plastic surgery in Montreal. The math is horrifyingly clear. The life lesson here is brutal but true. You can build the tallest walls in the world, but they cannot protect you if you invite your enemy to dinner. I want you to really feel the silence in that room. Dominic just stares at the photograph. His face is a stone mask, but inside, his universe is collapsing. He whispers that this man sat at his table for 12 years. He married his sister Sophia. They have a 2-year-old son together. That is how terrifyingly deep Raymond buried his hatred. Dominic does not scream. He just picks up the phone and dials Sophia from memory. He gets 90 seconds to destroy his sister's entire life. He does not explain the treason. He just tells her to grab the baby, drive to a safe house, and trust him exactly the way she did when they were little kids. It is a terrifying truth. The deepest betrayals do not come from the people holding a gun. They come from the ones holding your heart. Sophia does not even argue. She just packs the bag and runs, back at the table. Harold is already pulling out the next nightmare, bank statements. 14 wire transfers bouncing through the Cayman Islands and Zurich, all tracing back to the Bianchi family. $4.2 million paid out over 6 years to buy Raymond's loyalty. Harold says this paper is enough to take to the old families and have Raymond executed the traditional way, but Dominic knows the cold reality. Raymond is already hiding behind Sal Bianchi's walls. They have to drag him out into the open. Claire asks exactly how they are supposed to do that. Here's a hard truth about human nature. Paper and proof are totally worthless if the person you need to confront is entirely out of your reach. Let's look at this piece by piece, shall we? Dominic lays out the darkest psychology of the mob. Sal Bianchi will not protect Raymond forever just based on a promise. Raymond has to prove his loyalty by killing Dominic himself, so they need bait, and that bait is Claire. But Claire looks him dead in the eye and refuses to just be a pawn on a chessboard. She has been surviving this madness for 6 years, and she wants to trap him with her own 2 hands. So Marcus Webb draws up the ambush over the next 36 hours, right while the East Boston warehouse is still a smoking ruin. They plant the leak on Thursday evening through a driver who thinks he is being clever. Never forget, guys. The most dangerous person in the room is rarely the one barking orders. The target of this setup is a guy named Delaney. Marcus figured out 8 months ago that Delaney was taking Bianchi money on the side, but he let him think his secret was safe. That is a brilliant play. Marcus lets Delaney overhear a fake phone call about Claire meeting a federal prosecutor at a fancy Cambridge restaurant called Rialto on Friday night. The bait is a sworn affidavit that would throw Raymond in a dark cell forever. Delaney swallows the hook instantly. He makes his panicked phone call, and Sal Bianchi has the details before midnight. But the truth happening up in that locked 20th floor conference room is a completely different story. It is a sharp reminder that letting your enemies think they are outsmarting you is the ultimate weapon. The beauty of this trap is how perfectly it manipulates trust. Rialto's owner is actually married to Dominic's cousin, so he casually shuts the restaurant down at 7, blaming bad seafood, and clears the board. Then there is Sarah Chen, the FBI agent who took the Bianchi files. She agrees to set up sniper overwatch from the parking garage across the street. Claire is nowhere near the place. Instead, a junior agent named Rivera, who is the exact same height and build, sits at a dark corner table wearing Claire's gray knit cap. Fast forward to Friday evening, and Dominic is glued to a ring of 8 security monitors. This is the lesson, guys. You do not win a war by charging blindly into the street. You win by controlling the room before the enemy even arrives. Claire is sitting right beside Dominic, her hand steady on his arm while Tommy Russo guards the door. They are watching the camera feeds like a movie they already know the ending to. At exactly 8:15, a heavy black SUV with tinted plates rolls up to the restaurant. 4 men step out into the cold air. One of them is Raymond. Dominic leans toward the screen, almost amazed by the predictability of it. Raymond came himself because his paranoia will not let him trust anyone else with the kill. He walks through the front door, flanked by 3 Bianchi soldiers. The place is dead quiet. The lights are turned way down, and there is the gray cap, waiting in the corner. Obsession is a fatal flaw. When you want something too badly, you walk straight past the warning signs. You and I are going to unpack this moment together, because it is pure chaos. Raymond glides across that dining room like a ghost. 6 feet from the table, he pulls his gun. The agent turns around, and in that split second, Raymond realizes it is not Claire. Suddenly, the ceiling shatters. FBI tactical teams drop from the skylights and burst through the kitchen doors, screaming commands. But Raymond is terrifyingly good at this. He does not surrender, and he does not shoot at the cops. Instead, he yanks a second gun, fires a shot straight up over his own men, and screams an order in Italian. His guys panic and just start spraying bullets everywhere, dropping 2 agents and blasting the bar to pieces. A cornered rat will sacrifice his own pack just to buy a second to escape. While the room is turning into a slaughterhouse, Raymond completely vanishes. He sprints down the back hallway, tears through the pantry, and plunges down into the cellar. He bursts out of a street-level delivery door into the alley, where a getaway car is already idling. Before the FBI even secures the restaurant, he is gone. 3 Bianchi soldiers are left bleeding out on the floor, and 2 agents are down. The trap snapped shut, but the mouse slipped out, and here is the truly heartbreaking irony of this entire night. While Dominic was busy playing 3-dimensional chess in Cambridge, Sal Bianchi had looked at the exact same chessboard and made a much colder calculation. No matter how brilliant your plan is, you can lose everything if you underestimate your opponent. Sal Bianchi is old school, and he is entirely ruthless. He figured out that if Dominic was setting up a fake meeting, Claire had to be stashed somewhere close but out of sight. A hotel is too public. It had to be the South End safe house. So while Dominic was watching screens, Sal sent a hit squad straight to the real target, inside that brownstone. Marcus Webb is sitting across from Claire, with a loaded gun on the table. Dominic put him there, because Claire refused to leave the building. But Marcus is 62 years old. He has not fired a gun in anger in 4 years. When the hitmen arrive, they do not knock. They blow the solid steel door straight off its hinges sometimes. Fate just decides it is your time to pay the bill. And it does not care if you are ready. Come with me for this final brutal sequence, because it breaks your heart. 4 men flood into that kitchen in under 7 seconds. Marcus kicks the table over and rips off 2 shots. Claire drops to the floor, grabs a hidden revolver, and actually puts the first shooter down with a bullet under the jaw. But the second guy puts a round straight through Marcus's stomach. Even going down, Marcus keeps pulling the trigger. Then the nightmare happens. They grab Claire by the sweater, slap tape over her mouth, and drag her out into the night. One shooter stops, looks at the blood, and walks away thinking the old man is dead. That mistake is going to cost them everything. Leaving a wounded man behind with nothing left to lose is the most fatal error you can ever make. Let's pause right here at the opening scene, guys. Picture Marcus bleeding out on the hardwood, desperately hitting speed dial with his one good thumb. It is brutal. He manages to gasp out, "They took her, Bianchi." Southie warehouse, before the phone slips away. Meanwhile, up in his high-tech fortress, Dominic catches that final wet rasp. You can actually see the microphone bounce out of his hand. For just 1 second, he is not the cold, untouchable Winter King everyone fears. He is just a guy who realized his whole world is crashing down again. The lesson here: you can build the biggest, safest castle in the world, but it only takes one phone call to tear it all down. True vulnerability always finds a way in. For that one split second, he is just 37-year-old Nico, staring at static on 8 screens. Realizing he is basically burying his wife twice in 1 week. It is a gut punch, right? But then the second ends. The grief instantly turns to ice. He does not even raise his voice when he calls for Tommy Russo, who is already standing there with one good arm and a fresh mag. Dominic orders every single shooter they have to be in the garage by 1 in the morning. Drunk or sober, it does not matter. They are hitting the Southie waterfront while Tommy dials. Dominic is already calling Vermont, the takeaway. Grief is a luxury you cannot afford when the people you love are still in danger. Action is the only cure for panic. Let's pause right here, guys. Look at Dominic. He's calling the shots, telling Elena to move the kid to a 3rd location. No questions asked. Elena just swallows her panic and says she is putting her in the car, refusing to know the destination. It's a beautiful, twisted kind of trust. Isn't it? Dominic says she's the strongest person he knows, closes his eyes for 1 single second of pure silent agony, and then hangs up. No tears. No breakdown. Just a guy going straight back to work to tear the world apart. And boom, exactly 20 minutes later, the elevator doors slide open. Enter Special Agent Sarah Chen, entirely alone, her tactical coat unzipped like she owns the place. The lesson here: sometimes the heaviest grief doesn't scream, it just goes to work. So here's the setup, and you and I have to appreciate the irony. Chen drove herself across the bridge into mob territory. She casually drops that his lawyer is breathing at Mass General, but then she hits him with the real price tag. Once his wife is safe, Dominic has to sit in a federal building and hand over Salvatore Bianchi. Every captain, every dime, the whole kingdom, and Dominic. He doesn't even blink. He just stares at the 6 different camera angles of the Southie waterfront and says he is done. He burns down his own empire just to get his wife back. Sometimes you only realize what actually matters when you're about to lose it forever. Meanwhile, across the icy harbor in some massive freezing warehouse, Claire finally opens her eyes. Picture this nightmare. Claire is zip-tied to a metal chair, her head absolutely pounding under a crust of dried blood. She's sitting under this harsh, blinding fluorescent light, and what does she do? She doesn't scream. She slowly counts the goons in the room, 8. Maybe 10 guys in dark jackets blocking every exit, and then, stepping right into the spotlight like a ghost from the past, is Salvatore Bianchi. The guy is 58, rocking silver hair and a February tan you only get by flying somewhere expensive. He smiles at her, not a crazy smile, but the calm, terrifying smile of a man who just waited 6 long years for his revenge. It just goes to show, guys, resentment is a patient beast, and it will quietly wait in the dark until you finally trip up. Sal starts playing with his food. He mocks her, saying they actually thought she had the decency to drown. Then he drops the hammer. Where is the kid? And this is where Claire shows you what real iron looks like. She looks this mob boss dead in the eye and admits she has no idea. She literally engineered it so she wouldn't know. Just for this exact moment. Sal actually laughs. He respects the game, calling her clever. But wait, here comes the gut punch. Another guy steps out of the shadows, and Claire recognizes him instantly. It's Raymond Falcone. She just stares at the guy who tried to ruin her life and says, "Finally we meet without a windshield between us." The truth always catches up to you. Guys, no matter how much glass you try to hide behind. Let us just freeze the frame right here. The whole temperature in the warehouse drops. Nobody has said Ray's real name to his face in 30 years. He asks how long she's known, and Claire completely dismantles him. She's got his offshore accounts, his real birthday, his mother's maiden name. She spent 6 years digging his grave. Ray absolutely snaps. He pulls a pistol, closes the gap, and jams the barrel right against her forehead. But Sal just calmly grabs Ray's wrist before he can even pull the trigger a single millimeter. Sal wants the kid first, then the kill. It's a brutal reminder that the people who hurt you the most are usually the ones who are in no rush to finish the job. They want to draw out the pain until there's absolutely nothing left. Now it is 2 a.m, and the South Boston waterfront is just soaked in this freezing, salty dampness. 30 armed guys are circling this old Bianchi warehouse. 18 belong to the mob. 12 belong to the feds. Talk about an unholy alliance. Right. Dominic is standing in the shadows of a crane, totally strapped up with a plate carrier and an earpiece. But here is the part that gets me. Tommy Russo is right there with him. His left arm is completely wrecked, just hanging useless. But his right hand is gripping a pistol like it's glued to his palm. He tells Dominic he's got his back, because someone has to keep him alive. Loyalty isn't about standing by when it's easy. It is about showing up when you've got absolutely nothing left to give. Stick with me here, because this is where the execution is just flawless. Chen gets on the FBI radio, confirming the perimeter is locked tight. They are waiting on Dominic's signal. The guy has a plan that belongs in a heist movie. Team 1 is going to make a massive racket on the east side, while Team 2 cuts the entire power grid from 2 blocks down. Meanwhile, Dominic and Tommy are planning to drop through a roof skylight onto the mezzanine, a layout he only knows from reading cargo records 3 years ago. At 2:16, a truck smashes into the front gate and starts blasting. 1 minute later, the entire warehouse goes pitch black. Preparation is everything, guys. When the lights finally go out, the guy who did his homework is the one who survives. The second those overhead lights die, it is total chaos. You get 1 full second of dead silence, and then the place just erupts. Guys screaming in Italian, heavy boots pounding the concrete, people just wildly shooting automatic rifles in the dark. But look at Claire. While everyone else is panicking, she executes what she has been mentally rehearsing for 40 minutes. She throws her weight forward, smashes the heavy metal chair against the concrete, and snaps the plastic zip tie on her left wrist. She rolls across that filthy, oily floor straight behind some cargo containers. She didn't wait for a hero to swoop in. She saved herself, but up on the metal catwalk. Sal Bianchi isn't panicked either. The old wolf is already moving through the dark. Sal is a veteran man. He grabs Ray and drags him up a ladder toward this elevated office box. 15 seconds later, Dominic drops in from the ceiling on a fast rope. He lands in the dark, barely 6 feet from where Claire was tied up, but the chair is empty. You can almost feel his heart stop in his chest. Then he hears her whisper his name from the shadows. He's by her side in a flash, slicing the rest of her ties with a tactical knife. He orders her to run to the north door where the FBI is waiting. He says he'll handle Sal and Ray up on the mezzanine. But Claire, she just looks at the man she loves and says she is coming with him. You see, true love isn't just about protecting someone. Sometimes it's about standing in the absolute worst crossfire together. You and I have to stop and appreciate this exact half-second. Dominic looks at her in the pitch black. There's no time to argue. And they both know it. He just whispers, "Stay behind me always." He shoves a small pistol into her hand and slips a closed folding knife right into her palm. She grips it without even looking down. They charge up the iron stairs, skipping steps up top. Sal is hiding behind a steel drum, already bleeding from a lucky ricochet. The old man fires twice around the corner. Dominic doesn't flinch. He fires one shot that nearly takes Sal's ear off, and a second one that rips right through the meat of Sal's upper arm. When the chips are down, hesitation is what kills you. Dominic didn't hesitate, and he didn't miss. The old boss hits the deck hard. and he is out for the count. But this is where the script flips. Ray steps out from the shadows, completely bypassing Dominic, and jams his pistol right under Claire's jaw. He tells Dominic to drop his weapon or she dies for real. Dominic absolutely freezes. His gun slowly dips down and he lets it clatter onto the metal floor. But Ray doesn't pull the trigger. He wants to gloat. He wants to give a speech. And that is exactly the mistake Claire was praying for. Ray starts whining about how he spent 30 years watching Dominic's family eat like kings while his own parents rotted in the dirt. Ego is a fatal flaw, guys. The moment you need your enemy to validate your pain, you've already lost the upper hand. Listen to this guy's twisted logic. Ray looks Dominic in the eye and proudly admits he killed his wife the first time. Now he plans to kill her again. Murder their kid, and then finish Dominic off. He actually calls it justice. But while his mouth is running, Claire's hand is moving out of sight. With one tiny click, she opens that folding knife Dominic gave her in a single savage motion. She drives it backward right into the thick muscle of Ray's leg. Ray screams in pure agony. His hand jerks and his gunshot goes 3 inches wide, just tearing the skin off the top of Claire's ear. He missed the bone, talked too much, and the victim becomes the executioner. And before the shell casing even hits the floor, Dominic is already making his move. Let us hit pause right here, guys, because this is the exact second this entire story pivots. Dominic slams into Ray so hard they both crash onto the metal grating, Ray's gun vanishing into the dark. Dominic has 30 pounds on him. But more importantly, he is fueled by 30 years of pure, unfiltered rage. He pins the guy, presses the gun directly against Ray's forehead, and his finger finds the trigger. And honestly, who would not pull it? But then Claire steps out of the shadows. She is bleeding, exhausted, and she tells him no. Dominic's hand is shaking for the first time in 2 decades. She looks at him and says, he lives in a federal cell. That is true power, choosing mercy when revenge is begging to be taken. She tells Dominic that Ray is going to have to sit in a cage and watch his own son grow up, knowing exactly what a monster his father was. Think about that for a second. That is 1,000,000 times heavier than just pulling a trigger and giving him an easy out. Dominic takes a deep breath. He actually listens to her. He lifts the gun just 3 inches and slams the heavy grip straight into Ray's temple, knocking him completely cold. He whispers to the unconscious man that this is for Claire and for Sophia, and just like that, the empire crumbles. By 3 in the morning. The waterfront is swarming with the FBI. They drag Sal Bianchi out on a stretcher, handcuffed to the rails, destined to die in a concrete box. So here comes Raymond Falcone, the guy who thought he was untouchable, walking out in zip ties with blood drying on his face. Agent Sarah Chen reads him his rights in the back of the van, saying it twice just to make sure the body camera catches every single syllable. But let us look at the real cost here, because it is absolutely brutal. 11 of Bianchi's guys are dead. 3 of Dominic's men bled out on the stairs, and worst of all, a 31-year-old FBI agent with 2 little kids caught a bullet that was meant for somebody else. The sheer tragic irony of collateral damage never stops. Meanwhile, across the river, Marcus Webb survives a 7-hour surgery. They took out 2 feet of his intestine, but he is going to make it. The doctor literally tells Tommy that if that bullet had been 2 centimeters to the left, they would be planning a funeral instead of a recovery. It is crazy how a fraction of an inch separates a tragedy from a miracle outside. Claire and Dominic are just sitting together in the back of an idling ambulance. Neither of them is hurt bad enough for a hospital run. Claire has this nasty graze on her ear and a huge dark bruise on her temple. Dominic is just quietly wiping the dried blood off her face with a piece of gauze. Guys, this is a man who has not been allowed to touch his own wife for 6 agonizing years. She asks him if it is finally over, and he looks at her and says, "It is only just starting, the trials are coming." Dominic tells her he is cutting a deal with the FBI. The absolute biggest, baddest boss in Boston is going to dismantle his own empire. He is keeping the legal shipping business, but the dirty money gets handed off to other families. He looks her dead in the eyes and promises he is done being a boss. From now on, he is just going to be her husband and Lily's father. She asks if he is sure, and this is where you just want to cry. He gently lifts her chin and says that 6 years ago, the life made the choice for him. But today, he is choosing her. By 7 in the morning, the sun is rising over the harbor, turning everything the color of old brass. They drive away in a plain FBI sedan, leaving the ghosts of the Mafia behind them. Stick with me here, because this car ride is where all the emotional armor finally falls off. They drive north for 4 solid hours. And Dominic starts confessing things he has kept buried for 6 long years. He tells her he has never even looked at another woman. Every single Saturday at 8 in the morning, he sat by her empty grave, just talking to a headstone, the saddest part. He only kept the criminal enterprise running because stopping would have meant accepting she was really gone. Every morning. He would turn his wedding ring 3 times on his finger. It was a nervous habit he started on their honeymoon. And he never stopped doing it for 2,000 days. That is the kind of fierce loyalty that wrecks your heart. But Claire has her own confessions, and they are just as heavy. She tells him that when their daughter was born, it was Elena holding her hand in the hospital room instead of him. When little Lily said her first word, Dominic was not there to hear it. And when the kid turned 4 and asked about her dad, Claire had to lie and say he was a good man who went to heaven. But here is the detail that will actually break you. Every single night, Claire read Lily a book about constellations. She made sure that little girl knew the shape of Orion by heart, so when the day finally came to talk about her father, she would already know his name by noon. Their car turns off a quiet road in Vermont, rolling up a long gravel driveway. They pull up to this little wooden cabin with smoke drifting out of the chimney. Elena comes out on the porch and just wraps her arms around Claire. No words, just pure relief. Then Elena looks at Dominic and gives him this one slow nod. It is the look of a woman who has hated him for 6 years, finally deciding to put that heavy burden down. And then a tiny shape steps into the doorway. It is Lily, standing there in her little socks on the freezing grass. She stares at his right hand, then stares right into his eyes. She asks her mom if her dad is actually home, and Claire just chokes up and says yes. But here is the most realistic, heartbreaking part. The kid does not immediately go running straight into his open arms. Instead, Lily just tilts her head to the side, trying to figure this total stranger out. She asks him with absolute deadpan innocence if he even knows how to hug. She says her mom told her he had been away for a long time, so he might have forgotten how to do it. Just imagine taking a bullet to the chest, because that is exactly how Dominic feels right now. He drops down to one knee on the freezing grass, and the tears just start pouring. He tells her he has always remembered exactly how to hold her, and finally she steps into his arms. Dominic just completely folds around his little girl. The 3 of them stand there on that quiet Vermont porch in the morning light, perfectly silent, because nothing else needs to be said. Let us jump forward 4 months, straight into a federal courtroom in Boston, because it is time for the bill to come due. The government throws a 71-page indictment at Raymond Falcone. We are talking murder, kidnapping, money laundering across 3 countries, and massive identity fraud. The prosecution puts their cards on the table right on page 1. They want life in a cage without the possibility of parole. Sal Bianchi gets hit with 44 pages of his own, looking at 40 solid years. On the 3rd day of the trial, Dominic takes the witness stand. He has a partial immunity deal that Agent Sarah Chen and the prosecutors hammered out over 19 exhausting hours in some dark little room. The king is testifying. Dominic trades his entire criminal network for a clean slate on the nonviolent charges, for 6 grueling hours. He sits up there and answers every single question they throw at him. His voice never even shakes then. On the 5th day, it is Claire's turn. She walks in wearing a simple blue dress, hair pulled back, looking like an absolute force of nature. She lays out the entire 6-year nightmare. From that hospital parking lot, all the way to the bloody waterfront warehouse. It is so intense the court reporter actually has to beg her to slow down. The gallery is dead silent. Nobody even breathes. By the time the morning papers hit the stands, the press has already crowned her with a new name, the Ghost Wife of Boston. Down at the defense table, Raymond Falcone is chained to the floor, and he cannot take his eyes off her. When Claire finishes her testimony, she turns directly to the man who ruined her life, and this is the part that will give you chills. She tells him she does not even hate him. She says she only feels sorry for his 5-year-old son, who has to grow up without a dad, just like her daughter almost did. She looks right into his soul and tells him he chose revenge over his own child, and that is a heavier punishment than any judge could ever hand down. For the first time in 8 days of sitting in that cold room, the untouchable Raymond Falcone finally breaks. He just drops his head in absolute, crushing, miserable defeat. You and I are going to look at this ending together, because the irony is heartbreaking. Raymond's shoulders start shaking, and he just starts weeping like a broken man. The jury comes back on day 9, handing him a life sentence, while Bianchi gets 42 years. But out in the marble hallway there is one last devastating twist. Sophia Moretti is waiting there, holding the hand of her little boy. She filed for divorce, the second Dominic told her the truth about everything. She walks straight up to Claire and apologizes for everything her husband put her through. Claire just kneels down, looks at that innocent little boy, and then stands up to wrap her arms around the other woman. Two mothers, finally free from the sins of their men. We're skipping ahead now, and the dust has finally settled. Claire is holding Sophia, whispering into the girl's hair that the little boy is innocent. He doesn't belong to the ghosts of their past. He is completely theirs. And Dominic actually keeps his word. He flips his entire underworld empire into a clean, legitimate shipping company called Moretti Global Logistics. No more illegal card rooms. 140 employees get retrained or paid out. Tommy Russo, the guy who was ready to die in a warehouse, is now the chief operating officer, wearing a crisp dress shirt. Even their lawyer bounces back from his injuries to exclusively represent their family. Change is actually possible, guys. You don't have to be defined by your past if you are brave enough to walk away. Let's look at how it all wraps up together. The author Harold Finch wrote a book about them and offered Claire 20% of the royalties. But she redirected every single penny to a scholarship for kids with incarcerated parents. Agent Chen got her shiny medals and a huge promotion. But the real kicker is the front page of the Boston Globe on sentencing day. It shows Dominic, Claire, and little Lily standing on the courthouse steps in the freezing March wind. The headline screams about a 6-year-old ending a 20-year war. But if you look at their faces, they just look exhausted. It didn't look like a victory at all. That's the bitterest truth about survival. My friends, sometimes winning just means you're the only one left standing in the cold. We are at the end of the line, guys, and it looks like a quiet fade to black. But this is exactly what the story of Claire and Dominic Moretti wants to burn into our brains. It proves that no matter how deep you bury a secret, the truth always finds a way out, even if it takes a little kid pointing a finger to reveal it. Look at the life lesson here. Real courage is not always loud or violent sometimes. It is a mother choosing to live in terrifying silence for 6 years just to keep her daughter breathing. Sometimes it is a ruthless kingpin ready to burn his whole empire down just for a single pancake breakfast with his kid. And sometimes it is just a little girl clutching a stuffed cat, looking at a ring and simply telling the truth.
One of the most powerful lessons in this story is that truth may be buried, delayed, or hidden by fear, but it does not disappear forever. For 6 years, Claire lives under a false name, raising her daughter Lily in silence, while the world believes she is dead. Her silence is not weakness. It is survival. She knows that the person who tried to kill her is close to Dominic, and until she can identify the traitor, returning home would put both her and her daughter in danger. What makes the story deeply meaningful is how the truth finally comes out, not through a detective, a confession, or a dramatic public accusation, but through a child's innocent observation. Lily sees Dominic's ring and simply says that her mother has one like it. That small sentence breaks open 6 years of lies. This teaches an important educational lesson. Children often see what adults overlook. They do not always understand the full meaning of what they notice, but their honesty can reveal what others are trying to hide. Lily has no intention of starting a war. She only tells the truth about what she sees. The story also reminds us that secrets carried for protection still create pain. Claire's choice to hide saves Lily's life, but it also costs Dominic 6 years of fatherhood, marriage, and truth. Sometimes survival demands silence, but healing demands revelation. For viewers, the lesson is clear. Truth matters, even when it is dangerous. Lies may protect power for a while, but they cannot build real peace. Eventually, one honest voice, one small detail, or one innocent question can expose everything. The truth may arrive late, but when it arrives, it changes the entire world.